Hey everybody, Kevin Carr here, and this is my friend Brandon Leum. We just had the chance to meet a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, man, what better person to get to come in and talk about this issue than Brandon? As you know, we've been doing and you'll know why here in a little bit, but we've been doing a series of posts just kind of highlighting our men's expansion, Sheltering Wings. And I think just the fact that we're going to be doing the work that we're doing has really opened a lot of doors and begun a lot of conversations. Our conversation is one of those. We're up here actually at Harley Davidson and Fishers. How you guys doing? They're cleaning the place up still, but they're great to let us come in and just spend some time chatting. And we want to make sure we just get the chance to
that's great.
So Brandon has been a part of an organization called Building a Refuge. If you've not followed them yet on Facebook, you can do that even while we're talking. But it's a group that got formed really to help guys struggle through some of the things that life just kind of brings. So can you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
And a little background on Building a Refuge?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Brandon Leum, as Kevin said. I appreciate taking time out to kind of listen in today. And we're here at Harley Davidson, as Kevin mentioned as well. They've been a really fantastic supporter of ours, I think, through the events that we've had over the past year. And we've had a lot of really cool things happen kind of here in the cafe. And I think overall, and I told them I'd do this, Connor and Rhonda and all the folks here, man, are pretty awesome. So I'm going to promote these guys. So if you guys are in the market for a Harley Davidson, come out and see them because they got some great deals going on and they're really, really great people. So anyways, that's my spot on Harley, and I love these guys. But no, really, thanks, Kevin. I think that, we really started Building a Refuge really to be a support mechanism for men in the community of Fishers. Where we're located here, Eric Robinson and myself and another gentleman by the name of Mike Rekoff have all had our own stories and experiences, I think, with suicide and being a suicide survivor and dealing with kind of depression and some of the things that I think guys, quite frankly, have a hard time dealing with and kind of letting it out. So Eric Robinson, myself, Mike, Tommy Perry, we kind of brainstormed this about a year ago, and we really thought, let's start maybe looking at putting some events together where we can bring in some guys and just allow them, the free time to be able to express if they have anything on their mind they want to talk about. If not, there's no pressure. There's no expectations. It's just an opportunity for guys really to kind of hang out.
Yeah, I like it. So you guys get the chance to interact with guys from all sorts of backgrounds, and you, like you alluded, you've got your stories too.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you're finding that guys are struggling with, and tell me about some of the things you're experiencing that are commonalities.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think what we find out is once we get into maybe hearing a story. So we've heard stories from everything from financial struggles, marital struggles, job struggles, loss struggles, grief, if you will. And it can be anything really, right? We kind of talked about there's no pain scale. And so any of the struggles that maybe guys are going through, we have a tendency in kind of pushing those down. But I think specifically some of the things that we really heard about I probably would say are, guys that are maybe struggling maritally or financially, job-wise, things like that, where they share a story with us and they talk about vulnerability. Vulnerability is a really, it's a big breath to kind of take in because you're really allowing yourself to be real with folks, and it takes a lot of courage. And I think that's what we really try to promote the most is it's a safe environment. It's kind of the band of brothers mentality is what we look at it as. And I think that's important for guys to understand that in terms of them being able to be vulnerable with us.
Yeah. So you alluded to before we got on your story and some of the motivation that's kind of at your heart level.
Yeah.
What connects you with these guys and really fuels your work.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So I'm a suicide survivor. My brother took his life about 4 years ago. I think some of the things that we've learned through this organization are commonalities, I think, in terms of what my own brother was struggling with in terms of his own mind. I think, some of the key areas when you think about that really drive men to get in that place can be anything from financial struggles to, marital struggles to job struggles to things like that really start to isolate themselves, right? And I think that, just through some of the research and some of the interviews and things like that, talks that we've had with folks, some of those commonalities are certainly there. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've had, a passion to do this because I love my brother. We were brothers. I think it's kind of interesting. Prince Harry talked about this just recently in an interview, and he is really passionate about men's mental health, which I think is fantastic. But, he talked about his own struggles that he has with his brother. If you have brothers, you may not be the closest, right? But you still are brothers, you still love one another, you still support one another, right? So I think that's my passion and kind of what drives me with this.
Absolutely. So yeah, a lot of good work, it's interesting and happens in the world is kind of born out of pain.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that you've been able to channel some of that grief into helping other guys. So when it comes to the other guys, what is it that I want to talk about the stigma, right? Neither of us are psychologists.
That's right.
We're just guys.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Hang out at Harley Davidson and drink coffee and do other manly things. But what is it? Where's this stigma come from, and why is it such a problem?
Well, for me, this is Brandon's opinion of it. I think mental health is kind of gotten just lumped into one bucket, right?
Sure.
So when I think of mental health, I think of it no differently than the health of the body, right?
Yeah.
If you want to train to run a marathon, you have to practice. If you want to be a better golfer, you got to practice. If you want to do anything really in life, you got to practice.
Yeah.
But there's tangible things that you can go do that with. If you want to be a better runner, you can go out and run. You can test your times. You can do all these things. You can better your nutrition, blah, blah, blah. Same thing with any other thing. When it comes to mental health, you just can't see it. So Mike Rekoff asked a really great question one day, of me. He's like, hey, who wakes up on January 1st and says, my resolution this year is going to be to better my mental health? Like, where do you even start? What do you do? Right? And so that really got us thinking about what is really mental health. And so I think what Fishers is doing is they're trying to remove the stigma for mental health. You, myself, everybody that's been around building a refuge, any of the guys that we've dealt with, we all have mental health challenges.
Sure.
It is what it is. What we really do is we try to say, hey, look, let's learn to walk along with them and accept them, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody walking this planet today has them. It's not a bad thing. What I will say is I think that if somebody's mental health can become that ill, no different than a pneumonia, no different than cancer, no different than an addiction of anything, it can kill you. Yeah. And I think that's what we're just trying to help out with in terms of being able to remove that stigma, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I don't think any of us would really balk at a guy who would feel a lump and go to the doctor to
That's
get
right.
checked out.
That's exactly right.
Now, it may take a little bit of encouragement from a wife to go and get checked out.
That's right. My wife would know that for sure.
Exactly. But we wouldn't stigmatize a guy for doing
That's
that.
right.
But if a guy started to feel like lack of motivation, can't get up in the morning, struggling with despair, that stuff starts to spiral.
Yeah.
We look at a guy like that and think, well, why don't you just toughen up?
Man up, suck it up. That's right. Yeah.
And it's not really good medicine. That's not really the right way to treat things. What happens when guys kind of give into that stigma and they refuse to share? I mean, just maybe even if you have a story from building a refuge, like what happens when guys hold that in?
I think what happens is, I think guys can generally become very isolated. I think that's the biggest thing. I think you certainly, and again, not being a clinical psychologist or anything like that, but just hearing stories, I think, you'll find, they separate from their family. They again, it's part of isolation. I think that's probably the biggest thing. I think also in terms of, you might see job changes, frequent job changes. You might see, kind of activity and behavior in a normal one's life that normally not, is not going to be there. Some of the signs that I think that we certainly read about a lot around, suicide awareness is, if somebody might want to start giving things away, talking about, hey man, I really hope you're going to be fine. Things like that are kind of trigger points, right? For kind of what that is. But, I think overall, most of the guys that have been a part of the organization that we are supporting now around building a refuge, I think if a guy comes out to it, they're reaching out.
Yeah, that's the thing.
You know what I mean?
Guys,
yeah. So, and it's, it's all over the board. I mean, we've have, gosh, I'm just trying to think across the many guys that we've talked to. We have everything from veterans, and dealing with that side of things. We have great connections there. We have guys that work in the professional clinical world. We have guys that are, CFOs. We have guys, it's in every walk. We have younger, I'll just share with you one of a great story. My son and one of his friends, they lost a really good friend of theirs, which is a common theme we're seeing today around opioid overdosing. And they lost a great friend. And so they've come out and hung out with us and just shared their own feelings and stories around it. So it's not just guys our age, right? I mean, I'm 49. I think statistically speaking, when you start looking at numbers, the highest rate of successful suicides today are men between 45 and 55. And if you really isolate it even further than that, it starts to get into the white collar, population, which is really interesting when you think about it overall, because it's very apparent today in suicides in teenagers and so on, and depression and things like that. But it's just interesting to me when you kind of look at the statistics and all. But so we have a pretty big variety of anyways of dudes that kind of come out and hang out.
So mental health is a big thing. Obviously, that's where you guys are just like, that's where you're spending your time.
Yeah.
And we at Sheltering Wings spend our time, in the domestic violence sphere, right? And so we've dealt with for years with female survivors of domestic abuse and their kids. And we've always served men, but we've never been able to offer residential care, emergency care on site. And we're expanding to be able to do that, hopefully at the very beginning of this coming year. But as we start talking about some of the trigger points you see among men who are struggling with depression, we just start talking about some of those behaviors and activities and trends you see. Some of those are the same warning signs we see from somebody who's experiencing domestic violence in their household. So that's where our missions start to kind of overlap.
Absolutely.
In your mind, what's the prevalence, or how often do you think domestic abuse fits into your?
It's interesting. I mean, in Hamilton County, I can tell you that we work with a couple of the folks that are part of the Fishers Police Department and Fishers Fire Department, and they've done a lot of training with those those folks in terms that are on the streets every day, if you will. And it doesn't just happen to be in Fishers; it's a Hamilton County project, if you will, and I think in focus. So it's pretty staggering. Scott Fadness, the mayor here in Fishers, was just out on a ride along and speaking to one of the officers and said that at least one call on a shift is a domestic, which is interesting. And he just domestic in general. And it could be men, could be women, could be both. So I think when you think about that in terms of how many officers are on the street and how many calls actually come in, it's pretty overwhelming when you think about it. It's real. Is this happening out there?
Same thing is the case in Hendricks County. In 2018, officers went on domestic disturbance runs that where the male was the victim 68 times in 2018. And so shout out to our law enforcement officers. I mean, the wisdom that they have to have when they respond to a scene.
Absolutely.
Trying to figure things out. It's got to be really difficult, but the prevalence is high, and it's higher than we know probably. I think that's what we're seeing, what we're learning as we talk to more people.
Sure.
But let's talk again about that stigma. You've got guys who are coming to your group who are deeply invested in what you're doing and a part of what's going on. How are you seeing the game change for them as they're starting to open up and become a little vulnerable to one another?
I mean, I think it's probably the consistency of the meetings. So we host them in Fishers and Carmel. We'll be kind of kicking back up again in Carmel. Beer Brewery North has been really, really great. Chip and Jerry, the owners of that location, have allowed us to come in on a Monday night once a month. And so we just open it up. So if somebody wants to come in and we just put it out there, we've had upwards of 20 guys, 25 guys, and we've had as little as 4 guys. The content of the meetings are relatively the same. We typically kind of have a couple of predetermined bullet points that we kind of want to tee up a discussion, but many times the discussion just takes its own life of itself, and that's really I think the beauty of what these meetings are all about. Here in Fishers, we not only are having we've kind of kicked this off, so it's No Shave November. My No Shave November is not real good. I am not, when it comes to growing a beard, it's not good. Eric Robinson's got a fantastic beard.
He does.
But, so we've done a number of events, like I said, here. We kicked one off early in the month. We also work with Sun King. They're getting ready to open up a new spot here in Fishers at the Stockyard. And so what we try to do is have consistent meetings all the time, and at least right now we've been mainly focused in kind of the Fishers, Carmel, Westfield, Noblesville areas right now. But it certainly doesn't mean that we're not going to take this out to other areas. I think it's important, but as you as you start anything, you really kind of want to start slowly, I guess, and so you just don't bite off too much, right? Because I think in this and what we're getting into, I mean, it's a global issue. Kevin, you know this, man. I mean, this is a global issue. Like I mentioned before, Prince Harry in England is a huge advocate of this internationally. And I bring his name up because it is important to him, right? And I think it's fantastic that he has taken the charge and says, look, let's remove the stigma of mental health, right? We're doing it at a local level. It would be great if we had the funding that he has. Right?
Nice.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
right?
We had one tier to sell or something.
Maybe a little point he'll see this and be like, I like those dudes, man, right? But yeah, I mean, but we really try to make it not so, I guess, sterile and clinical. That's the thing. We want to meet guys where they're at. That's why we meet here at Harley Davidson. We meet at breweries. We'll meet at coffee shops. Fisher's is also, and I'll mention this, they're doing a really, really cool thing. We talked about this last time we met. It's called Fisher's Care or Care Fisher's, I apologize. And so you can go online and you can schedule a time with really just a guy counselor, if you will. I don't think you can certainly choose clinical if you want to, but you can meet at coffee shops around Fisher's if you just want to hang out for an hour with somebody. Yeah, I mean, it's those things that I think help remove the stigma, right? That's kind of it's just getting in the mindset of folks that, listen, man, we all have a mental health gauge, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mine may feel great today, but tomorrow mine might not feel so great,
I've always thought of things like despair,
Sure.
isolation. They're like mold. They breed in the dark.
Yeah.
They breed in damp places where there's not a lot of, sunlight. And when you start to shine a light on those kinds of things, it's amazing to see how people all of a sudden perk up. They start to feel some hope again.
Right.
And it's just an important thing. And it really just comes from connection, doesn't it?
Yeah,
There's no magic formula.
I mean, Universalism, I heard that term not long ago, and I had to think a lot about it. But, when you can sit down and talk with somebody that's walked in your shoes, man, it just changes the whole mindset of where one is at. I know for me, specifically talking with others that have lost siblings to suicide, and how do you deal with parents? How do you deal with extended family? Especially if there's challenges, how do you manage those? How do you do this? How do you do that? And I'll just be honest, Kevin, my faith in Christ has certainly become rejuvenated, I think, in terms of the community that has found me. And that has provided a great deal of calmness for me because there's a great community around that. I'm not saying it's for everybody, and that's okay. But what I am saying is I am not going to be shy about telling people what has helped me. And so that's great. And a lot of the guys that help in our organization, are Christ followers as well. And but I can tell you this: they're not going to whip a fastball Bible at you.
No.
They're going to embrace you, and they're going to listen to you, and they're going to walk along because I guarantee it will find somebody that's walked in your shoes. Yeah, well, that's cool.
I know I've experienced that in my life as well, and my faith has been an anchor.
Yeah,
it really is. So you mentioned Band of Brothers earlier. Yeah. You just used the phrase, but I love that movie.
Yeah.
I also love Hacksaw Ridge. One of the movies I saw recently is one of my favorite.
Yeah, I mean they're guy movies.
Do you have a favorite war movie?
Man, there's so many great films out there that I think that that just kind of depict the meaning of just trust and I guess courage and all of that. But man, Band of Brothers is a big one. I think, because my grandfather and my grandmother met during World War II, and it's got such a connection to it. You get it. You know what I mean? I played team sports in my life, and so, when you start to understand what it means to rely on somebody and trust in somebody, and I think that's why I bring it up, right? I mean, it's probably a favorite of mine. I got a lot. I'm a movie guy, so.
I think there's something to explore there, though. I mean, I haven't seen many movies about war, especially about our soldiers going to war, that don't really illustrate the point that we don't leave people behind on the field, right? If somebody's wounded, we risk ourselves to go back in and pull that brother out.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I think that's a lot of what I see you guys do.
Yeah, there's a big connection.
What I know we're trying to do as well. The last thing that we want to do is stay back behind enemy line or back behind the lines in safety, and to ridicule people who are out there getting injured.
That's right. Yeah.
We should be out there pulling them back.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah. Another one that jumps off from you is like 12 Strong, was just out not long ago. That's a great film. I mean, any of those films like that you can connect with, right? And I will say this. We have a gentleman that his name is Mike Stevens. He's the director for Veteran Affairs, and he is so passionate about just the veteran community in general, right? Even though he's pretty focused kind of around the benefit side of things, but he's so focused on the health of veterans that come back. And it is so important, man, because they can teach us so much, you know what I mean? And I think, obviously we're celebrating kind of around, I shouldn't say celebrating, but remembering anyways, Veterans Week. And it's important, right? I mean, we can all connect to that. And I think you're spot on about, man, look, if somebody's willing to come to us, we're willing to listen. And I think once you're a part of the group, you're a part of the group, right? And, come out to a bar meeting.
Yeah, why not?
Right?
So it is, I did notice.
I know, I was bar, I'm like, hey, and then I was like, that's a great acronym.
That's a great acronym. Fantastic. So what would you say, Brandon, if there's a guy that's watching this video now, who watches it later, who either is in a situation where maybe they're being abused, where they're experiencing despair, where they're struggling, maybe having thoughts of suicide, or what would you say to a person who has a friend who they think might be experiencing that sort of thing? What would you tell them?
Yeah, well, I would say to you this: if you're out there and you're in a situation where you're being abused, right, and there are things happening within your family that creates an unsafe environment, mainly for yourself, but maybe for your family as well, reach out to us. We are so excited to have this partnership with you guys, because the way I look at this, Kevin, is that if somebody calls me today on my phone, right, and says, hey, Brandon, we have this gentleman, here's what he's going through, he needs a place to go to. I will drive him out to where you're located to get him to a safe environment, because I trust and I know he's in good hands. I look back, like I said, in my own situation that I understand that my brother went through, I wish he would have had some of this around. It is what it is, but these things that are being developed are great. They are great, and I think having an environment like that, rather than sleeping in a car, sleeping in a hotel, feeling bad about asking a friend if I can hang out on your couch, reach out. Call us, Eric, myself, Tommy, any of the guys that are a part of Building a Refuge. Check us out online. There's information at www.buildingarefuge.com. You can go to the Facebook page, a lot of contact information there as well. We'll listen, you know what I mean? And having the resources like yourself, I think, to support a human, a man, to get through this is what we do. I mean, this is what we're focused on, and what we really want to help. I mean, because at the end of the day, if we can provide a little bit of hope, it gets you to the next day, it gets you to the next day, and gets you to the next day. So, yeah.
I love it, man. That's really well said. I mean, if you're in a position where you're in danger, be sure you call our 911 if you're in immediate danger. Call our hotline. It is 317-745-1496 if you need help, or you can go to shelteringwings.org, and you can talk to someone there who's trained and able to help out. Certainly, we'll post contact information for you guys and Building a Refuge below this post. But, man, I think the more we can talk about these kind of issues, the more guys like you are willing to stand up and say, hey, man, I've been there, here's what I'm experiencing, and it can get better. The more we do that, the more we can have a better opportunity to prevent other people from experiencing the tragedy that you've experienced, other people from just continuing to struggle needlessly. And all glory to God and all of that.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. Yeah, thank you. I would just say one last thing. If you have feedback, and you're watching this today and you say, hey, I'd really love to see this, put it on here. I know you're a great listener, Kevin. We're a great listener. I mean, this collaboration between the two organizations, I think, is what it's all about. So if you have feedback, put it out here. We're welcome to that. I think that's how we can kind of spur the energy. We can really understand kind of what's happening. So, yeah.
And we'll continue the conversation, like I said, at Sheltering Wings, and we'll have more conversations in coming weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.